Right, hi everyone. So I'm Stephen, and I'm a community artist and an academic. So I'm interested in something called praxis. So I'm interested in my practice influencing my research, and my research influencing my practice as a way of living and being. And so what that basically means is that I sometimes write highfalutin academic stuff and policy stuff, and on the other hand, I integrate all that into community arts practice, where I never actually, where I don't actually say or use any of the terminology at all that I might use today, on and off, and I keep it really real. And I'm interested in grassroots cultural practice. And so today, I'd like to talk about community art and the social production of space, which again merges together these two things. It merges together, on the one hand, what grassroots practice means, but also tries to weave some theory around it and place that practice and theory into a context that hopefully is relevant to the way we do things today or might do things tomorrow. So what I'll do is I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about this, the social production space, what it means to me, how culture and art and design and stuff can feed into that. And while I'm doing that, I'm just going to show some films which are of my practice. And at the end, I'll come back to talk more specifically about what you're seeing now. So yeah, it's slightly jumbled up, but I like it that way, and it's intentional. So I'm just going to attempt now, through the wonders of my not great skills, to begin this. Right, I don't want that. Yeah. You can't hear any sound, can you? Like from the film. Good. Okay, right. So yeah, this is, I guess, let's talk about social production of space. So one of the things is this confusion of the idea of place and space. Place is very much used today. And Creative People and Places, for example, has somewhat, as an Arts Council funded initiative, has somewhat shackled itself to notions of place being something which is an area on a map. An area particularly where often you find people with low levels of cultural engagement. And this, I guess, play is about evidence that shows that people are less involved in these areas in culture and arts, and they traditionally, according to the Arts Council, have less opportunities to be involved in the arts. These are something that's there a lot at the moment, things around, and then people try and talk about outreach and difficult to reach. And I think it's interesting to consider that that many of these places of low engagement in culture, which actually have lots and lots and lots of cultural activities going on. They do lots of things already with very little, if any, money or support, more particularly from national agencies and even local councils. And so this leads to a position where these people are being called uncultured, when really it's the definition of culture that's at fault here, and art, and what is art. And it's, I argue, intentional that that's the case, because it sets people, it others people, it marginalizes them and places people at the peripheries, suggests that they are uncultured, and it's one step from being uncultured to being uncivilized, and another step from being uncivilized to being colonized. And that what much of the attempts to create these ideas around low culture and low levels of engagement do is position artists as being the colonizers, opera, theatre, whatever it is. And there's nothing wrong with that. But the problem is when people already have their own cultures, what I'm interested in is there's many ways to produce space, as we'll go on to talk about, but how how is it that some things are seen as cultured and some are not? And what's the impact on those communities? I think particularly with coronavirus, we've seen like more and more people and show their creativity. Woo! Fabulous. And there we have it. So that was the end of that. So yeah, we have. Can you still see my screen or not? Or just me? No, that's a shame, isn't it? I shall try and talk whilst doing this. Yeah, so the coronavirus, what we've seen is lots of people, communities pulled together, doing loads of stuff, cultural stuff, great stuff, supporting each other, coming together, being creative, families, everybody. And one of the things that I've tried to do through this period is maintain my community arts practice. And yeah, right, so I'm back on. I think I'm just gonna, and that's some of what you're seeing in this, or will see if it ever decides to properly work. Right, what you'll see in this, and what I'm going to talk about. Right, forget that. Move this onto somewhere around here. I don't know. Yeah, let's just watch that bit. I seem to remember that. Right, yeah. So I think people talk about a new normal, and I'm not interested in new normal. I hate the term, but what I'm certain is that we must not and must not allow there to be a return to the old normal or a new normal based on the new normal. What we need now is radical, systematic change, because what the coronavirus has shown over and over again is that we have very little power, and that the art world that we have come to rely on, which has always been weak and vulnerable and elitist, and never in the favour of working class people like myself, is in crisis. And that both means that we can't rely on them for jobs as a scene, and it's perhaps wrong that we did so. And I think instead what we need to do is we need to take the opportunities to call for a complete change. And of course, that's not going to happen. I'm not silly enough to believe that it is, but we must call for those changes. Because coronavirus has widened class divides quite clearly in this country, and class divides in the UK have always been massive. However, I think it's important to recognise that what we've seen in this time of physical distancing of types is that home is where we start from, and home is where our hearts lie. That's where our cultures and ourselves and our being, our personalities develop in the first instance, through our families and on through the rest of our lives. And I think this is where we need to focus our creativity and cultural aspirations, not on big buildings, glass buildings that cost hundreds of millions of pounds and are there to serve tourists and middle class people on the whole. And these places decide that they need to then, because they're under pressure from government, to reach out. And the problem is that they are the ones that are unreachable. And it's not only that they're unreachable, but they're unreachable because they want to be unreachable. They don't want the great unwashed in their spaces. The fact is that 8% of people make up the majority of people that frequent UK arts and culture as it's defined by the government. And therefore 92% generally don't, which makes the idea that there is an outreach or difficult to reach in terms of people in working class communities rather ironic, because actually it's the glass art centres that are difficult to reach for the majority of people. So what does it mean? For me, I'm interested in grassroots community art. This is one of my, this is someone that I work with. We'll turn that off. Right. I'm interested in both high quality and grassroots community art. And that has taken a position where I go into communities as an outsider and go to the pub, talk, just sit down, do stupid stuff, meet people, and ask people what they want to get from it, what they want to do, what they would like to see happen. I'm interested in finding out what we can do together to make a real difference to people's lives, and often that means using culture to create new spaces where things that people do not consider cultural, where things that might not be cultural happen, or certainly not what Arts Council England and others might consider to be cultural. And underneath all this, I do this because I'm interested in why arts and culture can help people get something done in their area that they themselves can't do. Why is it that artists or arts organisations doing outreach can sometimes enable changes which might be a new bike track, might be tidying up the area, whatever it is, to happen when people have asked for this beforehand and were denied these things, and yet suddenly an artist such as me can come along and things happen. Why is that right? What does that say about the role of an artist? What does that say about arts organisations? What does that say about levels of trust in these communities who apparently have low engagement and high unemployment and high levels of poverty, which in many cases in some respects is true, yet actually they also tend to have very strong community bonds, very, very strong ways of policing themselves and organising themselves in their own way around all sorts of activities, some of which are criminal, but nonetheless are the way things, that's how everyday life is. How is it that we can somehow work this spell? I'm interested in the ideas around making do, around tactical employment of culture, not strategic, tactical. And that means looking at moments in everyday life and how creative and cultural practices can work tactically for the benefit of those who really want to need some support. And so I'm interested in community art as a means of kickstarting community development. I'm interested in helping people rebuild their communities and stimulating new conversations, new ideas, helping community groups develop their strength that they already have, amplify people's voices, never speak for people. And I'm interested in looking at ways of raising the community's profiles. How art can, in a way, I write a lot about art washing, and that's obviously a tool where art's used for negative, in my opinion, marketing reasons and exploitation. Yet nonetheless, I use art quite clearly. On the one hand, we do great stuff together and I'm led by what they want to do, not what I want to do. So I have no idea about what's going to happen, but I know that great things will happen because it involves brilliant people. But what I do know is that the people can always, let's just move that on, that people can always have great ideas about what they want to do in their communities. This takes time. Community development, community art as community development takes time. And there are many obstacles. Community gatekeepers, like the old, what's left of any community groups, for example, and other people who have some forms of power in those areas can actually hold areas back from development. They're often reluctant to cede power. And I think that I'm certainly not interested in this idea and that what I do or what we should do is any form of placemaking. And again, this word comes into being. Place is used frequently around these sorts of things, and I don't do placemaking. I do place garden, and that is to protect the people that are there, so that they can welcome people into their area. And well, there's a surprise. So I'm really interested in in that. Where was I? Oh, yes. Right. So let's just see if I can get this on. So I'm, again, before I give up. Right. We've seen that. Oh, right, I give up. Okay, my screen sharing's playing up. Anyway, you've got enough of the pictures. Let's just focus on this now. We can have a chat. Yeah, placemaking is a problematic term. I'm interested in place garden. I'm not interested in making places. Places are already made. They already exist. People can make their own places, their own ways. They don't need anybody to help them, right? But they need help to protect their places and their ways of life, because art and culture, when it's seen as being, when these people are identified as having low culture, low engagement, that's a sign that they need to be civilized. And my opinion is they don't. That we can work through community art on stuff that's just as, that can help them develop the strengths, like I say, that can make them resilient towards people who, in the case where I'm working, want to have tried since the 1940s and 50s to demolish all the houses and move them to new towns, because they're all mining villages, and those people refuse to go. And now there's 1,000+ houses coming down the hillside from Bishop Auckland, which is a place which has had hundreds of millions of pounds invested in it by a hedge fund, one of the richest 100 people in the country. And now that area, in terms of the county Durham, is seen as number 2 to Durham City, the city of Durham, where all the posh people hate people from the north, even though they live there. This is, and so that these houses are coming down, and people are worried about displacement. Not to be wanting to protect, not wanting to be to not welcome people. These people are really keen on benefiting from regeneration themselves. And so what I'm interested in is how art, community art, and as a form of community development, can avoid placemaking, but sell the area on its strengths, the strengths of its great past, of its people who have pulled together, who are very working class, but nonetheless care about their area and about making changes. You see, I realise that I'm from a working class place. I'm from Jarrow originally, but I'm quite privileged now. And I'm interested in using that privilege, right, my privileges, in ways that can help people who are like what I was once like. I'm interested in that, and I'm interested in how that can make changes at every different level. And so, again, I work mainly in what could be seen as public space, but I find that term in itself really problematic and troubling, because public space, what is it? I don't know. Some of it's not even public, pseudo-public space, you name it, whatever. Most of our public space is not space at all anymore. Most of our public space has been long since taken from us, right? Because it was once real public space. To me, is common land, right? And most of our land has been taken off from us by them. And so I want to take it back. So one of the things that I'm interested in is how can community art help people take back the land, take back control, as the Brexit message is. And many of these areas are really, really big Brexit areas, right? And so I'm interested in what taking control really means. It doesn't mean giving it to the Tories, right? Because they don't want to, they have no idea how to control these areas, right? The people know what they want, right? I'm really interested in localism, and I'm interested in ideas around space making, not place making. And this form of space making is an interesting political thing because it appeals to Labour councils like Durham, who desperately want to avoid being seen to effectively socially cleanse, having once tried to socially cleanse all the pit villages and move them all to concrete art-filled, brutalist new towns, and failed miserably, but nonetheless pissed everyone off. that they don't want to be seen to do it with a load of Bellway housing estates instead. So it's like, okay, so they're quite like, right, we need to invest. So there's an opportunity there. At the same time, the area now has a Tory MP, and she is like, oh, great, people taking control. So there's basically massive gaps, right? And what I say is the opportunity for people to actually take back control, because no one gives a crap about the land, right? And actually say, do you know what? We tidied it all up. We did it all ourselves, right? We've now turned it into gardens. We've turned it into playgrounds. We've turned it into spaces where circus is happening. We've turned it into spaces, we're doing fire, we're doing raves, right? We're putting street parties on, we don't care. And we're just going to do it. We're not asking permission off any of you, right? We're going to tell you about it. And guess what? We're going to sell it, right? We're going to sell this as somewhere where we are doing all this creative stuff, right? It's all our ideas, right? And we're just going to push on and do this. Yes, it's using public funding, right, to support it. But ultimately, this is public funding that has luckily been freed of any shackles and any restrictions. And I talk a lot about instrumentalization, and this is about anti-instrumentalization. So it's about how can we take this funding and just give it to the people and let them do stuff that like basically changes their everyday life. So they've come together, they've tidied up their own area. These are people, this area was called Little Beirut, right? Oh, you don't want to go there, Stephen, right? It's terrifying, right? It's one of the 0.04 highest, most deprived areas in England. It's not. People have tidied it up and done great things. And now people are seeing this in a really positive light. And now the council and the Tories are selling this on, isn't it great what these people are doing, right? And I don't really care, because ultimately neither do they, because what they want to see is investment in their community, right? After 70 years of complete disinvestment, right? And so we've decided to lead by example. And so these things are based on around, and this is a bit of a sort of theory perspective, I guess. This is the theory behind this comes from my reading of Henri Lefebvre, who wrote about a lot of stuff, but what really interests me is his ideas around the social production of space. And I'm interested in that because art is, as Janet Wolfe said, a social product. Always a social product. It can be that social product can take many forms, but art is a social product, and art is also a cultural practice. One cultural practice among many, not the only form of cultural practice, as it's often confused today. And I'm interested in art's position and relationship with social structures, other social structures. I'm interested in art as being part of our everyday lives and how that fits with other cultural practices as part of our everyday lives, like football, like drinking, like religion, like all of these things. They're all cultural practices and many, many other things, because culture and art is what makes us human, not art, right? Art is one form of culture, but it is all of our cultural practices that make up our everyday lives, that make us human. And so, if culture and art are social products, and that is what makes us human, it can be if we start to think about all of our cultural practices and invest in our cultural practices and how we can collectively and individually develop them at every level, from local right through international and through various networks and relationships, then that can surely enrich our lives in ways that aren't about, but also are about economics, right? There's too much emphasis on we make places to make economic benefits. Well, I'm sorry, but that's not really what life's about. It's important, I accept that, but what I'm interested in is cultural practices that actually are about much more than money. There's always a spin-off and you can always monetize everything, but let's not start from money. Let's start from people, from being human. And I'm sure they will monetize the hell out of it later on, right? But let them be the ones that do that, not us. And so I'm interested in, once you've understood arts and culture are social products, and that artistic and cultural production exist in and help generate socially produced space, it's possible to understand how the relations, how these relate to environments, urban environments, for example, rural environments, cities, towns, villages. And this links towards, I guess, the idea that space is not a thing. It's not a container like place, right? It is a product and a means of production. And that social space is ultimately produced by human relationships, not economic relationships, right? Not any other form of relationship. It's humans. We produce social space by interacting with each other. And one really, really good way of doing that is through cultural practices, because, as I say, cultural practices make us human. So you create a loop and a circle, right? So we create spaces. There's far too much, the notion of place leads us down towards buildings and pins on maps, right? Social spaces can happen in these places, but are not dependent upon them. And the problem right now is we invest everything in buildings, in places, in place-based approaches to dealing with problems. But we don't see that actually the answer here is looking at social relationships and the investing in social spaces and the cultural production of them as being key. And it's actually really, 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 really economically beneficial as well to consider things in terms of social spaces rather than physical concrete buildings and spaces. These, because they are much cheaper, often they happen on the street, they happen in everyday life, they don't take much investment, you can do an awful lot, you can make huge changes, you can make for a much more culturally engaged and diverse community, society. And yet all the time we focus on building more buildings, supporting more buildings with our recovery funds, while all the artists and all the communities, right, who never go in these buildings anyway, are left totally screwed, right? That's not right. And I'm, as an artist and someone who goes to these great glass citadels of art a lot, I'm not happy about that. And so I'm excited by Let's Create and the Arts Council's 10-year strategy, where they've made themselves a rod for their own backs. And I'm, for one, I'm not going to let them get away with it. They want to learn how to, they want to talk about wanting to break down the barriers between artists and communities. Well, guess what? If you just invest in artists and communities and cut out all the middlemen, often men, right, white men, and start thinking about like just giving money to people to do stuff with, right, to put on carnivals, to do all these things, then you suddenly make a big change, right? We demand it. We've got every right to demand it now. They can't even keep their infrastructure in place anymore. What's left of it's fallen down. We thought one day, up until recently, I thought we'd have to tear down the citadels. But now I've come to realize that they're tearing themselves to pieces and that they're going to fall to bits. And no matter, you can throw 1.57 billion pounds at these places all you want, right? But ultimately, they're going to crumble because they've never been any good to anyone ever since the Arts Council was set up in 1946. It was just a facade and a mask to cover up the fact that they needed to pay for Covent Garden with taxpayers' money because the posh people didn't want to pay for it all themselves. And that's basically been reproduced across the country ever since then, right? And it's not on. So as far as I'm concerned, what I would like to do, and I'm going to stop shortly, is to understand that there are many different forms, right? Not just community art, but there are many ways that we can think about socially producing space. This can take the form of activism. It can take the form of grassroots stuff like what I'm doing, gardening, etc. It can take many forms, and I'm just going to attempt finally, just so that I can try and illustrate this in some sort of way. Says he. It can take many different forms, and I'm just attempting to see if I can find this thing, but I don't even think I can find it. It's just such a shame. Anyway, You can't see that. I'll post some stuff anyway afterwards. Right, we'll get rid of this sharing screen. So, yeah, community art, ways in which we engage, these are crucial things, right? We need to consider how it is that if we consider that everyone has culture and only some culture is being invested in and classified as culture, then that is a big problem. It's a big problem for people. It's a big problem for the way that people are stigmatized and it's about how and why places are invested in. The Arts Council wants to see these changes, and I say great. And so everything that I do, my practice and the practice of other organisations which I work for, which includes Arts Council, National Portfolio organisations, and Creative People and Places organisations, and others, that they stick to the things that are in Let's Create, right? It is, and start to shift the balance to invest in artists, to invest in communities, to invest in small arts organisations and grassroots cultural organisations, to spread that investment across places that haven't got it. Because you see, the problem is that when I was a kid in Jarrow, right, we had jazz bands, we had amateur dramatics, we had free sport every day through the summer holidays, we had arts groups, right, coming out of our ears, we had all sorts of stuff. We had youth centres, right, community centres, little community theatres. We had our own cinema. Everywhere had its own cinema, right? We had music venues. We had all sorts, and they've all gone, right? All of them have gone. We had festivals and parades. We made our own. We painted we got the coal wagon and transformed it into a float. We dressed up. We jumped on and off it, right, while it rolled down the road. And there was no health and safety, and no one asked for permission, and it hardly cost any money, right? Where has all that gone? And if it's all gone, how much damage has that done to people's spirits in these communities? Oh yeah, it's fine for all the Morris dancers down south, right, who've got their little villages and, you know, and all their lovely little fairs and fetes, right, because they can keep things going. But what about everybody else? The libraries are closed. There is nothing. The village where I'm working and have been working had all sorts. It had a pageant. It had the best dance floor in County Durham. It was a mining village, but people came from across Durham. It's sprung. It's still there. It's still there, and it never used anymore, right? It's just lying derelict. The people remember it. They remember all of the parades. They remember the jazz bands. They remember it all, and all they want is something like that back again, right? And instead, they get an opera company coming in for a week. Great, right? And it probably cost more money for that opera company than it would have cost to build a bloody new rec for them, where they could have used it and done their own things all year round. And so what I'm trying to do there is to kickstart those sorts of things again. And so for me, the ideas around social production, the cultural production of social space is linked to social action, right? It's linked to radical action. It's linked to democracy and cultural democracy and social justice, right? And that means change. And unfortunately, that is my role. And within my field, I speak out for change because I work and I'm from these communities and I work in these communities. And all I ask is that we really, really consider what we are doing with our investments. And I can guarantee you, and this is where I'll finish, that out of that 1.57 billion pounds that's just been invested and still being invested right now, and everyone's celebrating, and we're all delighted. We're being forced to say we're delighted by a state, right, that is instrumentalizing art for the benefits of middle-class people, right, against everybody else, everyone else, white people, black people, against working-class people, women, everybody are discriminated against. All it's for is to perpetuate and maintain an elitist system, right, that is part of the subject, part of the system and structures that exploit us, right, and subjugate us. And but we can use art to produce a positive form of social space, which actually demands the impossible, demands real change. And I think that that's something that we desperately need to do. And so I call for all of you to do the same, and to think radically, and ask and find your own changes and make those changes today. Thank you. And if anyone's got any questions, then go for it.
Thanks so much, Stephen. I'm sure loads of people have got loads to say about that. Shall we open up? If people want to, I don't know, do we raise hands? Where's my participants box? Do you want to put, if you go on participants, you can raise your hand, I think, if you go, oh, I can't remember where it is. Or just write in the chat.
Whatever.
So good at Zoom out.
Yeah, sorry about the crapness, honestly. I don't know what, my computer must be knackered. It did it the other day as well.
I'm going to remove your pin. There we go. And then we're going to go on gallery. Thank you so much for that. I'm really excited by most of the things that you say. It's really inspiring, and I think like totally on point for most of the conversations that have been happening throughout Design Week so far, and just all the conversations we've been having in York about like investment in York specifically, and how we don't feel like we have a say at all in how the council sort of decide to spend their cultural budget, whatever that they think that cultural budget is. And we were sort of looking at asking for a bit of a review on what they're spending their money on. But I don't know, do you work with local authorities and stuff? Yeah. Like how receptive are they to your ideas about this?
Well, I think local authorities are they're not just all my ideas either. I mean, in different places, in Lancashire, I'll be working alongside big big institutions around, and I think they're keen. They know they need to change. They know they can't afford to do things the way they've done. But certainly, to look specifically in the case of Durham, the Durham County Council, are really, really supportive. They've helped with blokes to come and do like heavy stuff when the community and me are flagging. Do you know what I mean? Because that's not our thing. They're over the moon that people have taken back the land, right, and that they're getting on with it because they couldn't even afford to maintain it. So in a way, we've turned the shithole, right, into somewhere that's lovely for free for the council. So that's how we sell it to them. It's like, look, honestly, it's a win-win, right? All you've got to do is just let people get on and do stuff, right? So now they're like, oh, we've got this project funding. Is there another area of land we could like turn over to get it ready so that the community could take it on? Do you know what I mean? So they get it, right? They get it. And they even like happily like sell their what they do and their cultural offer on the back of it. Do you know what I mean? Which is great too. So I'm, it's not that we're looking to try and sort of take the council on or belittle the council. We're trying to say, look, to them, just leave us alone. Help us when we ask. So it's about you help us when we want help, right? Don't do stuff to us. Do stuff that we want when we ask. Right, and do what we want, not what you think's best for us, but what we think's best for us, because we know better than you. And it's sort of like, I guess that's the sort of thing that I'm getting across. But certainly, there's absolutely totally supportive, basically.
That's really encouraging to hear. So you're sort of seeing a bit of a shift in that culture, because I think we're not quite there yet in York. I wouldn't say. But well, we'll see. I mean, we're trying to get there. Johnny, did you?
I can just. Now I'm part of this multiple complex needs network. The network itself has looked at the Trieste model in Italy on how the creative industries engage with people with multiple complex needs. And I think that the network in York is trying to sort of produce their own version of this for future engagement with people with multiple complex needs. But my argument is that we should be looking to do this with everyone in the community, and not just pockets of people where government are willing to fund investment. And Lankelly Chase are a big part of trying to get York to socially change in the way it engages with people creatively. But I don't want this to sound like I'm working class, and I'm from a small market town in Shropshire, and I grew up on a council estate, and there was a great sense of community there when I lived there. But now I've gone back to visit, every year, a couple of occasions for family things, and all that sense of community is even disappeared from, well, quite an affluent town, really, and I think there's an element with York of this high and low art, and how they sort of kind of base the value on artists working in the community is not the same as the value placed on artists that are achieving great things in exhibitions in galleries all over the country and stuff. I think there needs to be a sort of balancing of artists that work in the community. To me, are the most valuable ones. Someone from Lankelly Chase said to me that artists and creative people are kind of the first responders in a community, and I that stuck with me, because with all this sort of talk about creative people having to retrain in other work, it's absolutely ludicrous, when this week has proven to me that there's so much wonderful stuff going on in communities that is creatively led, and it's having a really positive impact on things. So I think it's easy to get despondent, or I certainly was getting a bit despondent during the COVID times, about how we can turn things around and help councils and bodies of people with the money see how valuable creative practice is in engaging with communities and socially changing things for the better, really, and leveling the playing field, I think, is what I'm trying to get at, really. And it sounds to me, Stephen, like you've really looked into this a heck of a lot more than I did at uni, in terms of art for social change, or engagement.
I mean, mate, to be honest with you, I agree with everything you say. Really well put. It's good that you're feeling encouraged and stuff by the week. I think the reason why I I went to uni late in life, right, and got a PhD, was so that I could theorize. And as you've seen, right, when I write an academic paper, right, or do a keynote lecture in an academic place, right, I start off like I've just done with you guys, right? That's it. So it's like this, right? This is a load of shit, right? And all the rest of it. And then I work out afterwards, being working class, right? How to then turn that into academic language, right? That suddenly, and then how the theory fits around that, so that the argument becomes do you know what I mean? That they can go, all right, shit, God, wow. But basically it comes from, like you say, just going yeah, fuck it, right? Things need to change. Do you know what I'm saying? Enough's enough.
Yeah.
Right? And but yeah, it's good. It's nice one, mate.
Okay, all right. Well, thanks for letting me rant for a little bit.
No, it's good.
No, it's really good.
No, good. I totally think that, in the model that's what you're trying to do in York, sounds like a really good thing, and that's really positive. So all strength to it,
There's a lot of talk about the disadvantaged people in York with multiple needs that don't have access to these cultural sort of places. I've been to the gallery and talked to them, and they have had in the past or recently had programs whereby they are engaging with the disadvantaged communities in York, but they are they're almost like token gestures, it seems at times, rather than the people in power really wanting to enhance the communities in and around
they are token
anywhere.
gestures. Yeah, it's intentional. That's the point. They are token gestures, but it's not. We need to be aware that they are token gestures, and that's not good enough. But their argument is, oh, we are doing this. Look, we've ticked these boxes, right? Well, tough. It's not enough. Do you know what I mean? By any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah.
Should we should we go on to Brian's question? Brian, do you want to ask it, or shall I just say it?
Brian.
I don't mind asking if you want.
Go on then.
Hello everyone. Hi Stephen. Thanks for the talk.
Hi,
I'm dead interested in the high street context, and I've put the question there about them being very much run on consumerism and retail and stuff. And I was asking you, what levers do you think can be pulled to change these spaces? And that's rooted in the fact that we go where people are at, rather than so. What I've noticed is people are still keen to go to high streets, maybe not so much for shopping, but for that connection sort of thing. So how can we change them? Because it seems like everything that's in place, whether it's business improvement districts or whether it is, retail companies or whatever, they're not interested in filling these empty shops in a sort of perverse way.
You're totally right. They're not. And there's a whole complicated economic set of reasons behind that, but in particular, your question, I guess, is how can you? And just recently, the Arts Council England, and I've commented with it recently, are now saying arts can bring back people to the high street, right? And they've got research which shows that basically what they recommend is, wouldn't it be great if they're exemplar of what a high street and what art and culture can do for it is Westminster, the city of Westminster. And it's like, wouldn't it be great if and I'm like, are you for real? This is what our Arts Council England are putting out. The aspiration. How many other high streets have got Buckingham Palace, the seat of power, on it? I mean, it's crazy. So this is their starting point, right? That's a crazy starting point. Instead, the problem we've got is meanwhile spaces, right? The meanwhile space thing's a terrible, terrible thing. And I've been involved in it since 2007, right? And I've made money for organizations. I've explained how big companies, the Kuwaiti royal family, and saved them hundreds of thousands of pounds in business rates, right? And all the rest of it. So I know all about this. And it's no good, right? We've got to move away from meanwhile space. So to answer your question without going into a massive thing, basically no meanwhile, right? If we want to make high streets different, the shops are never going to come back. We need to take back buildings either on a very long-term lease, which is not just for artists, but to communities, and make these community cultural hubs where there's artists in there, but there's also space for all sorts of other community activities and people to come together and have, set up cafes and share food and support each other and support people with additional and different needs and be a place that's welcoming, where art happens, where support happens, where people just chat, right, and whatever, hang out. But there's also all this stuff happening in them, because it's this multi-use thing that's really important, and it brings people together, and it can cross all the barriers and bridge all the divides through culture, as I was saying before about cultural practices. But in order for that to happen, right, we can't be passed from pillar to post at the whim of a property developer or a landlord or a local council who's decided, oh, sorry guys, well done, you've brightened up that high street, now off you go. Because that doesn't give us any certainty. It doesn't give any community members any certainty. They want to know that there's a place there that they can come to and rely on, like I was talking about. These could be the new community centres, right? The new places where amateur dramatics happens, where all the things that I mentioned before can happen, where we can plan parades and carnivals, right? Where everyone chips in, because they're all there. But in order for that to happen, so basically what I'm saying is we, again, like I say about take back control, they need to give us a space. If we're going to help them regenerate their high street, our part of the bargain is we want paying properly, right? And we want a building to keep. No more meanwhile, right? No, otherwise we're not going to get involved. And in some places around the country, I've been working with cultural commons who are setting up artists, arts organisations to come together and say, we're not going to help you with regen anymore unless you give us these things, spaces and long-term commitments, right? We're not going to do it. And what's more, we're going to call you out for gentrifying and art washing the thing, right? And because until we start to do that, right, collectively and stand in solidarity, they're just going to pick us off and they're playing us against each other, and all they're doing is promoting precarious existence, which is never going to create a solid, and this is from an economic perspective, it goes against the government's own argument, because a precarious, unsustainable, meanwhile temporal economic base, right, will never create a cultural economy of the sort that the government claims is the only way that it's going to get the UK through the 21st century. So we have to have a solid base, and that has to be based in the high streets, in buildings that are given to us and the community to manage without, and to go and ask for support and not be told what we should do in those spaces. I hope that answers your question, Brian, a bit.
You're calling for a strike, yeah? That's all right.
Sort of rent a bit of a, you know, I just think we need to, honestly, there's so many people, there's always someone's going to go into an empty space, isn't there? Oh, look, here's another one. I know loads of people. I know, let's face it, there's huge arts organisations that are funded by Arts Council England. They're not a million miles from where you guys are, right? That have got bloody hundreds of spaces and happily hand them out to artists willy-nilly, right? And in the meantime, they're making a lovely amount of money out of it. Right, the brokers and like, what's that about? Right, seriously, we need to move away from that and have proper like community ownership. And why is that such a radical thing? What I can't understand is, why is it radical today? It wasn't. Why is it today? And it's these questions we need to be posing back to the government and the Arts Council and the local councils. Why have you changed your mind? Because you were all about community centres not that long ago, guys. Even in Thatcher's time, right? What's happened? And you know, and so I'm really interested in that's why I use these historical references a lot, because things have radically changed, right? Have badly changed, and I think some of the way of shaming them is for it to be pointed out quite clearly and coldly, so that they basically haven't got a leg to stand on. Do you know what I mean? We didn't used to have like community centres in a blinking empty shop, did we? And then move it down the road because I'm sorry, or someone wants to try out a new business in that one. No, they had proper bespoke buildings that existed in some cases for hundreds of years, right? Do you know what I mean? Often built and paid for by the bloody community in the first place, right? So we've got to get back and we've got to like argue, look, this is part of this fragile economic world that we're living in, and it's not good enough. You know what I mean?
So good. Right. There's so many good questions as well. I can't really decide where to go, and also like long questions. Lorna, do you want to ask your question?
Sorry, it's long, isn't it?
Yeah, I can't read that.
Right. So basically, I just wondered, Stephen, what you think of this there's a prevailing narrative that imagination is at a low ebb, and also that, you know, with privilege comes more capacity to imagine, if you like. So I wondered, given how imaginative the cultural spaces that have been produced are that you're talking about, just your response to that. Right.
First, I would say that I think there's a great deal of imagination out there, and I think that there's more and more imagination happening now, I think, than there has been for quite a long time. And I mean and I think that's people seeing and realizing that we need to change. I think in the communities where I'm working, I mean, so there's people, for example, there that have set up their own, and you know, I'm saying all this, I'm not an anti-capitalist, right? I'm not someone who's like some sort of so I've helped like people set up like community cafes and turn them into community interest companies, right? Guys who've been unemployed, who've now getting funding and who've built, and not just that, but making money out of selling food. And then this week, people in the village have made connections with free food sources, so they're getting free food in and cooking it and giving it to over 100 families. And this has just started, right? And it's not me that's done it. It was their idea, and all I've done is try to help. And sometimes there's still a feeling that they've got the imagination, but they need permission, right? There's a sense of this permissiveness. I think that's the thing. And I keep saying, what are you asking me for? Do you know what I mean? It's a Belton idea, just do it. And so my answer to everything is, just do it, try it, do it. And there's this reluctance. And this comes back down, and there's a strong class-based thing, right, that's been developed. And it's something that I know because I've had to overcome it, which I have done now, as you can see, because I'm quite happy to do that to people from different classes now. But there's a sense of deference, right, working class deference. And so people are feel that because of the local councils and everything, right, there's a paternalistic deference, which is about having to ask permission in order to have things done, and that kills creativity, right? It kills the imagination. Conformity and compliance, as D.W. Winnicott, the psychoanalyst, said, who's a great influence of mine, said, conformity kills creativity. And what I say is that we live in a conformist society, right, which creates this form of creativity through the state system, which is what I call uncreative creativity, compliant creativity, and that is against the imagination, and it's against human will, right? It's against it's against what makes us human. And so if we can release that, then the imagination is endless. And so I'm a utopian, and I think that what fills me with hope, and whether it's people who are like often sometimes really right-wing, right? Tommy Robinson supporters, right? Being really imaginative and really wanting to do stuff for their own communities as well. And it's not just a certain type of people. Everyone's feeling imaginative. And do you know what? I don't care what anyone's political background is what I'm interested in is seeing people be inspired and try and do things themselves, right? I'm really interested in DIY and you know what I mean? And like as a raver and that in a past in this sort of thing, and there's not enough of it. And I remember that spirit of just going, do you know what, fuck it, let's do it, right? And if we can encourage that within communities, then that can make a big step change in like the way our society is sort of set up today. So I hope that answers, like, sort of.
I think you're just doing great at answering questions. Right, Andrew, did you want to ask a question? There's back at the top.
Hi, Stephen.
Hi, mate. All right.
Where was the question? Yeah, you at the beginning of this Q&A bit, you started talking about working with or for organisations.
Yeah.
And I suppose the question, what I became interested in at that point is the work that you're doing with these organisations. Are you able to co-produce the work that you actually go on to do, or actually are you just fulfilling what the funders require you to do?
I don't like that. I'm not a great lover of the term co-production, but I do like use it obviously in funding stuff because everybody else loves it. So I'll pepper my applications accordingly. Do you know what I mean? Cut your cloth and that, tailor where you need to be. I think it depends. The organisations that I work for, I will only work for them if I'm given my autonomy. And that sounds contradictory, but it isn't, because I'm a great believer in, as I've hopefully tried to get across, that my sense of autonomy is the ability to be free, to be able to go along with what other people want, right? Not what they want. And so there's always degrees of, oh, wouldn't it be nice if, Stephen, or why don't you? And I'm like, nah, let's just see what people want. So I certainly don't, on the surface, I don't do what funders want, but I believe that our organisations, but I believe that these organisations that I work with of all types actually do recognise that they need to change radically. And I think that there's degrees of understanding about what that involves, what that might mean, and what that, you know, what their aspiration is in that sense. But there are, right? There are, and I'm lucky to be working with some really good ones, and they definitely all recognise that they need to take seriously. They need to reimagine how they do things and understand the potential, the power of thinking about things from a grassroots community arts perspective, right? This idea of being and not knowing, right? And if you can't know, so the idea that they can come up with, oh, let's go and work with this particular group. And Johnny mentioned it, right? This idea of, oh, let's do an art project for people who have visual impairments or whatever it is, right? Or for people who are autistic or whatever, right? No, let everyone in the community, irrespective, right? Let's be respectful and supportive of everyone's differences, but let's all do a project together, right? Let's all do something together. Let's not split things off. And it's that soon. And so basically that's what I'm trying to get across. What I'm lucky enough to be able to do is for them to say, okay, where do you want to go and we'll support you. And it's about trust, right? It's about trust. It's about how do arts organizations and funders, how much can they trust an artist? How much can they trust the community, right, to be given some money and produce amazing things, right? And you can co-produce amazing things. And actually what you find is that when you take that route, rather than trying to micromanage it and script it in advance, you get better outcomes. So you don't know, right? Instead of knowing, they want to know. I say, I don't know. But what I do know is it's going to be better than what you think you know. So let's go for it.
So sorry, just to clarify then, are you saying that when a project is set up where the outcome is not preset, that the project then becomes more process-led? That's a beneficial project? I'm just trying to get my head around what you're saying.
Yeah, see, for me, it's definitely more process than product, right? So, you know, the whole point of social production is space, right? And the control of the means of production, the means of cultural production, right? Who controls it? Who's got to say? It's all about process, right? And so that is what's important, and it's about changing the way that we understand that process and how we set that process in motion in the first place. Who decides? Do you know what I mean? This idea, it needs to be truly coming from what people want, right? And then a process needs to happen that is the one that the people want to happen, because it's their processes, not our process either. And that through that complicated but nonetheless really, really beautiful human set of really complicated relationships and disagreements and agreements and imaginative explosions, something will come. So rather than thinking of these things in very linear ways, right, or systems-based approaches, we need to think of those processes, if you want to call them that, being really organic and really complex, but also really beautiful, and also ones that can't be mapped in advance, but can be mapped as you go, right? But if you attempt to map them or explain them in advance, you will prevent some of the imagination, the creativity from happening, because you're trying to know it. And what you have to accept is all we need to know is that when people come together and do cultural stuff, great things are going to happen. And the more that we're allowed to do it ourselves and trusted to do that, the better those things are going to be for those who really count, and that's the people who are involved.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone else want to ask a question? We've got Safi. Most of our city centre shops owned by private landlords. Do you want to talk, Safi? Where are you?
I'm here. Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. No, I was just going back to the point you were making about making spaces lovely in high streets or city centres. And one of the issues that we've found is that working with the council is that most of the spaces are owned by private landlords. The council have no way of being able to give those over to communities, even if they wanted to. And I suppose that links to a thought that keeps coming back when you talk about sort of making amazing spaces that should be commons, that it ends up the private landlords making money out of what people have made better. So I just wondered if you had any thoughts about that, really.
Well, I mean, to a large degree, you're entirely right. But on the simple level of the fact that there are complicated. In London, for example, do you know what I mean? The mayor of London had great ideas for creating cultural zones until he realised that, like, London's landlord structures are incredibly complicated. There are other places where they're less so, and it's easier to do these things. And the council or big landlords have bigger say. And so it's definitely variable. But you're certainly right. You know what I mean? Landlords are a major problem. They've bought up you know, this is what I guess crucially, when you live in a capitalist society, the idea of capital, the core root of capital is about dispossession, right? The primary capitalism is basically about accumulation by dispossession, which effectively is theft, right? And once you've started the theft, once you've done the thieving, then you can sell the thing that you've stolen for more and more money, right? Making it less and less attainable to those who had it stolen from them in the first place, because it goes up in value and they don't make any more money, so it becomes completely out with their reach. That's problematic. In terms of landlords, absent landlords, a lot of them are going to find in soon that the value of their properties are probably going to plummet. And there are things that the council can do and the government can do with regards to planning laws, although the councils pretty much have very little now. The government has quite a lot of power, and I know that they're unlikely to change it, but that's why we need to change the government. Guys, do you know what I'm saying? But in the short term, certainly what can be done is an interesting example of how you could do things is certainly, for one, don't support the landlords, right? Don't use the shops. Don't put an arts thing in there, right? Because you're basically saving them business rates, right? If you want those buildings back, let them rot. And the landlords will have to either sell them for less money, right? Or in theory, you can take them back. Do you know what I mean? There's nothing to stop you compulsory purchasing for next to nothing. So there are things that can be done, but certainly what you look for is spaces, whether on the high street or and I'm interested in communities as well, like, because a lot of communities want something in the community, not in the high street, and the high street's not necessarily the centre of the community. It's a place you go to shop. And yeah, it's important and you should have things to, but there's a lot of like, oh, we need to reimagine the high street. That's all about the capitalists and the landlords going, how can we get people to come back here, right? Well, actually, people want an art centre on their bloody doorstep, not having to get the bus into town, right? So there's a lot of myth making about this, I think. But one great example, just to finish off there, is that if you look at Dumfries, right, in southwest Scotland, the Stove Network have done amazing things with the mid-steeple quarter. And what they've done is they've set up a community land trust, community benefit society, sorry. So like cooperative ownership, backed, by the way, with a couple of £1 million from the Scottish government, but then that's a whole other political matter, because obviously, yeah, there's an SNP versus Tory thing going on there as well in southwest Scotland. But have enabled them to do something which is like a riff on a really classic sort of David Harvey like urbanist sort of take, which was to take back the city, right? And he said, you've got to take it back. Well, the Stove Network have come up with buy back the city or buy back the town. And I think like, and I've been quite critical of that, right? As in like, yeah, this is where we're at now. We can't actually take it back, but we'll buy it back. But they're in the process of buying back buildings from landlords on the high street and turning them into living spaces upstairs and like arts, crafts, community spaces in and around the market square. And the long-term vision's really, really interesting. And ultimately, they're buying it back, but as a cooperative, so it becomes cooperatively owned within the community and asset locked as such as well. And I think that that's really, sometimes if that's the only way that it can be done, then so be it. The trouble is, once you start to do that, landlords go, the price is 3 times what it, like the actual property's worth, because they know there's someone being given some money to buy things back. They're not daft, do you know what I mean? They're capitalists. But ultimately, if you want to wrest power from capitalists, and the only way we can do so is to buy things back, then we have to be willing to pay over the odds for them, right, to get them back. And that's just part of pure capitalist economics. So there are positive things happening, and I would like to see things like that explored more, definitely. So I hope that sort of answers a bit, Safi. Cheers.
We've got time for one more question. Is everyone happy for that? Yeah. Sarah, did you want to?
Hello. Hi, I'm from the softy south that is Nottingham. Welcome to Tier 3. And yeah, I'm in the starving artist category. I'm both an artist, which was, we did a lot of carnival work, a lot of festivals, a lot of events, community arts, absolutely all gone. But I do have a studio, so we got the £10,000 grant, and I'm eking it out as far as it will go. But my problem is I've done a slight U-turn. It's always been part of me, but I'm also an urban greener, so I missed the first minute of your screen sharing, but I'll be interested to know exactly what you've been doing. And we've come up with a plan, me and Robin Hood obviously have come up with a plan to replant Sherwood Forest from the city centre, 1 oak at a time, into the castle, and then out in schools and community gardens all the way through. Right tree in the right place, not always an oak, starting little projects. Now, the council love it. The castle is being redeveloped at the moment, so they have funded the first 80 oaks, but the council is now in that paralysed state of having less than no money. They're losing staff hand over fist. They're panicking. They're starting to very much get on this kind of, let's build everywhere, you know, anywhere anybody wants to buy any land. They're threatening lots of mature trees and things like that we're fighting against. And meanwhile, with my other hat on as well, financially, they're sending money out to all kinds of other places that aren't us, artist-wise. You know, they look to us to donate things and make the place beautiful and do stuff. But when it comes to actually giving, you know, £7,000 for an installation, it goes to somebody up that London, or wherever. Sorry for any softy stuff. So the difficulty for us is we've got all these ideas, we've come up with all these radical things, but we seem to be fighting against the people that we should be working with. And we keep saying we're here, we want to help, we want it to be our city, we want to make these things beautiful, we'll do this much for nothing, but we got to eat. So it's how you get through those negotiations and say, trust us, give us the money, we'll make this thing happen, but we have to make a living. This is, I mean, you're very true on all the things that you say, and it sounds an amazing project. I like it. It's sort of got a bit of a Boysian take, a Joseph Boys angle. Do you know what I mean? There's 7,000 oaks and that sort of thing. I don't even know. Just in the pub. We came up with it in the pub. No, it's cool. No, it's good. No, anything involving oaks and that, like, I'm really into. I think it's good, and and I'm not surprised that they've sort of gone along with it. But you're right. You know, I mean, just look at what the Nottingham City Council are doing with the Lincoln universities and stuff, do you know what I mean? And that it's like, it's trying to gentrify the life out of it, do you know what I mean? But it's like so half, honestly, they're never going to understand that whatever they do, like it's not just Nottingham, it's Newcastle, it's nearly every city, right? They're just trying to do these tired regen strategies, right? That are never going to work. It's not about competitiveness because everyone's doing it. It's just about sameness. There's no USP here. It's just bland, same stuff over and over.
And of course, it's people like us, people like you, that can come up with imaginative new things, right, and different things for a fraction of the amount of money that these things cost. That can really make radical changes. And if they could open their eyes, they could see how they could sell the city on the back of these things, right?
Yeah.
On the back of stupid, massive blinking, markets that are with a few blinking hipster coffee shops in, with a university involved and all the rest of it, like what's happening in Nottingham, right? Well, God, who has, everywhere has done that. Great, but you're doing it how long? Oh, about 20 years after everybody else. Great, that's so innovative. Not.
But it's that fear, isn't it? It's that fear to take risks. I mean, I don't know how much you follow it, but we have a large Into here, Broadmarsh Centre, So that's all ground to a hideous kind of interesting derelict brutalist thing. Is the first thing you see as you come out of the station. And they've been given £8 million to level it, and they've very reluctantly said, what should we do? And we've all gone, it's a park.
And they're like, no, it's not.
Is it a park? It's a park, isn't it? So we're all trying. They're like, anyone else got any ideas?
They'll not do that.
So we're trying really, really hard, but it's like pulling teeth, honestly.
No, you won't.
Obviously, they've got to make money. They've got to make money, and they're terrified. And I do understand.
They do, and council tax is their primary way of making money, and that means building houses, basically.
It's a small city, as you know. It's a tiny city in a big county, and they're two separate authorities. And there's a couple of architects who've come up with some fantastic plans to put social housing in a park. So leading up where there was social housing before, and it's amazing. But, they won't do it, but crucially as well, just to finish off there, your point about making a living. I am lucky, and I don't make a great living, but I do make sure that I get paid for everything that I do. Although I do stuff voluntarily as well, but that's my choice. But I am lucky, and I'm lucky to be trusted and paid to be able to do that. And that's something that I find really troubling, because loads of my friends, loads of people I know, loads of organisations I know are not in that position. But I've developed some form of reputation that enables me to be seen as someone that can be somehow trusted to do something radical, and that actually it's going to be great. Do you know what I mean? And that's like me self-market. There's a lot of self-market. I'm not ashamed to say it. Do you know what I mean? There's a lot of no, not at all. No, and I'm exactly the same. I'm completely shameless. But it's not it's no guarantee of any kind of income. I mean, I did have 5 or 6 different streams, but because they're all in the arts, gone. And so now it's kind of how do you, if you are that radical mover, shaker, change maker, then how do you make sure that you're getting paid by somebody? Who is it?
This is it.
Philanthropist. That's what I want to know.
I know. This is where I think there comes a point where it's possibly that isn't going to be some of the things you can't. I'm just reading the comments there, and in some of those comments that's coming up about being stuck in conformity, that it's really hard and sad, but there's so many people that are basically out their depth doing jobs that they shouldn't be doing anymore. Right? I'm really sorry, and I don't want to sound like a Tory or anything, right? But the world's changed, right? And these people are about self-protectionism, right? They're not interested in the community. They're not interested in serving the needs of anyone, not even businesses, right? They're just stuck in this out their depth in a world that doesn't exist anymore, and that all they're doing is holding back, right, the changes that need to be made. And that applies to politicians at every level. As you can tell from my position, right, I'm about trying to get people to take back control, right? I am a socialist, but I believe strongly in individualism and collective action, right? Not as being separate, that they are one in the same, and that we must understand that the state, whether it's left or right wing, right, has far too many people in it at every level, right, who are basically gatekeepers and are stopping things from happening, right? And if that's the case, I don't care what their political background is, they need to go, in my opinion, right? Because we ain't got time to be messed around, right? I'm nearly 50, right? I've got 2 kids, and I want their lives to be different, right? And it's going to take a long time for that change to happen, right? For that shift to happen. But if they're going to stand there and block it, nah, right? And we have to realize what's going on, and if we all really call them out and push for this, right, in all different ways, collectively and individually at every level, then I'm sure that we can really start to bring about these changes. If we try and woo them and stay on their side and just go along with them, all we're doing is perpetuating the very thing that'll never make anything change happen.
I agree, but it's bloody exhausting.
It is.
I'm 20 years old. Look at me. I'm 50. Only 50.
I think that's an absolutely brilliant end to the session. I've got another one at 5 o'clock, so I'm gonna say let's stop there, guys. But yeah, I think everyone should follow Stephen on Twitter. You got a really amazing blog. Do you want to plug blogs?
It's colouringinculture.org.
And yeah, Stephen, it'd be really cool to get some book recommendations from you as well. Maybe I'll send them out on a.
Yeah, I'll do that. And I'll send, if you want, I'll send out, if anyone's interested, and I'll send links to the films that I was going to show, including the one at the end where there's where we have a big rave in a pit village, which just happened the other week during a slightly dodgy lockdown scenario. But you've got to push these. Everyone maintained their social distance. And it wasn't an event that was promoted or anything, honest, Governor. And it was a really beautiful outpouring of that feeling of solidarity on the one hand and fuck the system on the other, right? And I think that's where I'm heading next, right? Is to really up the ante in terms of both art and artistic quality on the one hand, and it's the community's idea on the other, and to bring all those things together. So I'll send you a link to that, and I'll send you some reading material stuff if you're interested. But yeah, cheers everyone, brilliant questions and that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Fight the power.
All right.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.